Hello friends, I am Dr. Deepak Garg and this is our third video in NEET PG orthopedic series, and today we will discuss about polytrauma, open fractures, malunion, non-union, stress fractures and crush syndrome. So let's discuss about the classification of fracture on the basis of relationship with external environment. So fracture can be two types. It can be a closed fracture or it can be an open fracture. Closed fracture means fracture hematoma is not communicating with external environment and the overlying skin and soft tissue are intact. Open fracture means fracture hematoma is communicating with the external environment and the overlying skin are breached. So this is open fracture. Let's look at this question. The Cerny classification used for skin lesion in closed fracture, used for skin lesion in open fracture, used in pathological fractures, used in stress fracture. The answer is A, used for skin lesion in closed fracture. Let's look at the details. So we already know now the Cerny classification is used for skin lesion in closed fracture. Grade 0 is no or very minor injury to the skin, very low energy fracture. Grade 1 is a superficial abrasion or skin contusion, medium severity fracture. Grade 2 is a deep abrasion with skin and muscle contusions. This is usually a severe fracture pattern with high energy fracture pattern. Grade 3 is a extensive contusion or crush injury, and it may be associated with compartment syndrome, Morel level and or vascular injuries, and usually associated with complex fracture patterns. Let's look at another question. Patient had road traffic accident and suffered fracture in mid shaft tibia with huge bleeding with periosteal stripping. Which grade as per Gustello-Anderson? So Gustello-Anderson is a classification used for open fractures for soft tissue injuries, and they are asking if the patient having periosteal stripping and which grade as per Gustello-Anderson. So the answer is 3B. So it's C3B. Let's look at the details. So we already know Gustello-Anderson classification used for soft tissue injuries in open fractures. So there are three grades. Grade 1 is wound size is less than 1 centimeter and it is usually a puncture wound. It is considered as like a closed fracture only. Grade 2 is 1 to 10 centimeter wound size and without significant soft tissue stripping. Gross contamination is not there and high energy fracture patterns are not there. So size of the lesion is 1 to 10 centimeter but not very high energy fracture patterns, not very much contamination in the wound. So this is type grade 2. Now grade 3 is a wound size is more than 10 centimeter and all these features like gross contamination will be there and it will be a very high energy fracture pattern. So it is again divided into A, B and C. 3A is again a complex fracture pattern may be there and with gross contamination, size more than 10 centimeter. Now grade 3B is wound size more than 10 centimeter and there is extensive soft tissue stripping, and usually they use the word periosteal stripping. Like in the previous question there was the word mentioned periosteal stripping and the answer was stage 3B. And in stage 3B we usually need a soft tissue coverage, so plastic surgery intervention is usually required. Stage 3C, wound size more than 10 centimeter and there is a major vascular injury, so vascular reconstruction is required in stage 3C. So vascular surgeon is required in stage 3C. Plastic surgery is intervention required in stage 3B and stage 3C. So let's look at a few questions. Which of the following injuries can be classified as Gustello-Anderson stage 3 injuries? So we already know stage 3 wound size more than 10 centimeter. So option number A, fracture, open fracture with clean wound with less than 1 centimeter long. No, it is more than 10 centimeter. Wrong. Open fracture with laceration more than 1 centimeter long, usually up to 1 to 10 centimeter is grade 2, not grade 3. So it is wrong. 3. Open segmental fracture, this is true. Open fracture with extensive soft tissue damage, yes, this is true. So stage 3, this would be the answer. Let's look at the D compartment syndrome with an open fracture. No, the answer is C. Open segmental fractures, open fracture with extensive soft tissue damage. So extensive soft tissue damage is seen in grade 3 Gustello-Anderson classification. So answer is C. Next question, a patient with gunshot wound in tibia presents with comminuted fracture tibia with 2 centimeter wound. 2 centimeter wound usually seen in grade 2, but gunshot wounds are directly classified into stage 3A. So if the gunshot wound is mentioned, it will not be grade 2, it will be directly stage 3A. So this belongs to what grade of Gustlow-Anderson classification of the open fractures? So the answer in this case will be C, grade 3A. The next question, vascular repair to be done in which Gustlow-Anderson type? So we already know vascular repair will be needed in stage 3C because of the vascular injury in stage 3C. A patient presents with open fracture of tibia with 1.5 centimeter opening in the skin. 1.5 centimeter means less than 2 centimeter, 1 to 2 centimeter, grade 2. Which grade it belongs to? It is grade 2. Option is B. Which of the following is true about Crush syndrome? Hypokalemia, hypercalcemia, hypokalemia, metabolic alkalosis. So the answer in this case is A, hypocalcemia. Let's look at the details. So now what is Crush syndrome? So in the Crush syndrome, limb is compressed for many hours. For example, after the earthquakes, after the building collapses, or sometimes after prolonged immobilization. If limb is compressed for many hours, there can be massive crushing of the muscles, and it will lead to the muscle ischemia, muscle cell death, and muscle cell death means rhabdomyolysis. So muscle cell death will lead to the release of the intracellular contents into bloodstream. For example, myoglobin, potassium, creatine kinase, these components will come out of the cells and they will come into the bloodstream. So if the myoglobin comes out, it is very toxic to kidneys and it may lead to myohemoglobinuria, and it can cause acute tubular necrosis, or it can also cause renal failure, that means acute kidney injury. So these are all the features of Crush syndrome. If potassium comes out of the intracellular space into the blood, so it will lead to the hyperkalemia, and it is very toxic to heart, so it may lead to cardiac arrhythmias. Similarly, lactic acid collects in the space because of the ischemia. So if the lactic acid comes in through the blood, it will lead to the metabolic acidosis. And similarly, there is a high iron into the capillaries that will come from the intracellular space, and this will lead to the fluid shift, and again this fluid shift will increase the pressure, and it may lead to the compartment syndrome in some cases. So if the blood flow is restored, and when the Crush injury is relieved, if we relieve the Crush injury, the blood flow is restored to the affected area. So the toxic metabolites, for example, free radicals and other toxic metabolites will collect in the area, and they will cause the further damage. They will go into the bloodstream and they will cause the further damage. This is called reperfusion injury. So reperfusion injury is also seen in Crush syndrome. So this was about the pathophysiology of the Crush syndrome. So now briefly, what are the features of Crush syndrome? It can have rhabdomyolysis, hyperkalemia that will lead to the cardiac arrest. It can have cardiomyopathy, it can have hyperuricemia, hyperphosphatemia, hypocalcemia, myoglobinemia, myoglobinuria, metabolic acidosis, acute tubular necrosis, and acute renal failure, disseminated intravascular coagulation. So how will we manage the Crush syndrome? Most important measure is prevention. So prevent the Crush syndrome to happen. So that is the most important measure, which is achieved by maintaining a high urine output by giving large volumes of intravenous crystalloids. So we want to maintain a high urine output. This is the key. So the main treatment is maintain high urine output. And what we give intravenous crystalloids. For example, forced mannitol alkaline diuresis is maintained until myoglobin is no longer detected in the urine. If oliguria persists, renal dialysis may be needed. So this is the question. This is question from PGI. So let's look at this question. So it will have multiple answers. Option number A, most common in earthquakes and bombings, true. Causes acute glomerulonephritis, acute kidney injury, true. Release of myoglobin in the blood, true. Occurs due to massive crushing of the muscles, true. Causes acute tubular necrosis, true. So all the answers from A to E are true. A, B, C, D, E. Next question, which of the following is not a component of crush syndrome? Myohemoglobin urea, it is a component. Massive crushing of muscle is a component. Acute tubular necrosis is a component. Bleeding diathesis, it is not a component. So answer is D. Crush syndrome is managed by 20% dextrose, hydrocortisone, maintaining a high urine output. So maintaining a high urine output is a main key component of management in crush syndrome. So answer is C, maintaining high urine output. Investigation of choice for multiple stress fracture. So for single stress fracture it is MRI, but for multiple it is bone scan. So answer is C, bone scan. Let's look at the details. Stress fracture, patient will usually have pain or pain on standing or walking, and this is a fracture in any of the bone where the bone is usually not displaced and patient feels just the pain, and there is a history of sudden increase in intensity or frequency of work. Fracture is due to abnormal or repetitive loading of a normal bone, not abnormal bone, it is a normal bone, usually seen in dancers, athletes, and military recruits. And it is more common in lower limb than upper limb. And the hallmark clinical finding is a tenderness, it will always be there. So let's look at the investigation. We usually get the x-rays, but x-rays are usually not positive till 2 to 3 weeks. So till 2 to 3 weeks x-rays are usually normal. So the investigation of choice for stress fracture, it is MRI, and MRI will show the soft tissue edema. And investigation of choice for multiple stress fracture, MRI will pick only the one reason. So for multiple stress fracture it is bone scan. Most common bone affected in foot is metatarsal. And what is March fracture? March fracture is a stress fracture of a metatarsal, and second metatarsal more than third metatarsal, and neck of metatarsal more than shaft of metatarsal. Treatment is rest plus immobilization. Immobilization means plaster application. Now let's look at some most common sites. The most common site in metatarsal neck more than tibia. Metatarsal neck is the most common site. Stress fracture of lower end of fibula is called runner's fracture. And the most common site of stress fracture in spine is a pars interarticularis of fifth lumbar vertebra. It will lead to the spondylolysis. Now differential diagnosis of a stress fracture. Again question from PGI. Differential diagnosis, we get the MRI. MRI will show the edema. So edema in the MRI can be seen in infection, it true. B, tumor, true. Neuropathic joints, osteochondritis. So the answer is A and B, infection and tumor. Any army recruits, that means possibility of stress fracture. Smoker, 6 months into training, started 6 months into training, that means that there is a recent increase in intensity and frequency of work. Complaining of pain at posteromedial aspect of both the legs. There was acute point tenderness hallmark sign of stress fracture, and the pain was aggravated on physical activity, again a point for the stress fracture. The most likely diagnosis is answer is D, stress fracture. What is March fracture? Already know the fracture of the metatarsal, second more than third, so answer is A, fracture of second metatarsal. Stress fracture treated by rest, cast immobilization, closed reduction, internal fixation. So the treatment is rest plus immobilization. So the immobilization is must. So answer is B, cast immobilization. Which of the following likely to go into malunion? Shaft tibia fracture, shaft clavicle, shaft humerus, shaft radius. So the answer in this case is B. Clavicle is the most common fracture to go into malunion. So answer is B, shaft clavicle fracture. Let's look into the details. Malunion is healing in an anatomically abnormal position, and the treatment is corrective osteotomy plus internal fixation. Let's look at few examples of malunion. Clavicle is the most common bone to go into malunion. Supracondylar humerus, Colles fracture, intertrochanteric fracture femur are the examples of malunion. Let's look at a few examples of non-union also. Lower 1/3 of the tibia is the most common bone to go into non-union. lateral condyle of humerus, scaphoid fracture, fracture neck of femur, and neck of talus. These are the fracture that usually can go into non-union. So let's look at this question. Which of the following is most common site of non-union? Lower third of tibia, lower lateral condyle of humerus, neck of femur, neck of talus. So the answer in this case is lower one third of tibia. Answer A. Fracture is said to be delayed union if there is no radiological or clinical sign of union after 2 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. So the delayed union is said to happen if it is more than 6 months. So answer is B, 6 months. Let's look at the details. So non-union is when the fracture is not united at the end of 9 months and there is no progress in fracture healing in last 3 months clinically or radiologically. So delayed union is no callus in X-rays after more than 6 months. Non-union, no callus in X-rays after more than 9 months. Diaphyseal bone usually go into non-union, whereas a metaphyseal bone will usually go into malunion. And the lower one third of the tibia is the most common site for non-union. We already know. So let's look at the types of non-union. It can be hypertrophic non-union. It can be atrophic non-union. Hypertrophic non-union, that means there is abundant of the callus, that means the ends are viable, that means the ends has the vascular supply. Whereas atrophic non-union, there is no callus formation, that means the ends are not viable, there is no blood supply in the fracture ends, so there is no callus formed. So it is atrophic non-union. Let's look at the details. Hypertrophic and atrophic has few things that are common, that will actually the things for non-union. So fracture line will still be visible in both. Fracture ends will be smooth and sclerotic in both hypertrophic and atrophic non-union. But callus, abundant callus will be seen in hypertrophic non-union, whereas there is no callus in atrophic non-union. Because the ends are viable, abundant callus is formed, blood supply is normal. So the biology is good in hypertrophic non-union, whereas biology is poor or abnormal in atrophic non-union. So if we talk about the treatment, immobilization is the treatment for hypertrophic because the biology is good. If we just immobilize, the fracture will unite. Whereas in atrophic, we have to do extra other than immobilization because the biology is not good. So we usually may go for autologous bone grafts, or sometimes we need to treat the underlying cause also. So hypertrophic non-union is of 3 types: elephant's foot, horse hoof, and oligotrophic non-union. So all these are the types where callus will be seen in all the cases, ends are viable in all the cases, just depending upon the amount of the callus that we see. These are the 3 types. And hypertrophic non-union is treated by stabilization of the fracture ends. Then atrophic non-union, again it is divided into 3 types. It can be torsion or wedge non-union, it can be a comminuted non-union, it can be a gap non-union. If we talk about the torsion wedge non-union, then definitely there will be some avascular component that is leading to the atrophic non-union. So in torsion or wedge non-union, avascular intermediate fragment will be there, whereas in comminuted fracture in non-union, there will be 1 or more fragments which are avascular. Gap non-union, usually there is a loss of bone between the fracture ends and the ends are non-viable. So let's look at the principles of treatment in non-union or delayed union. Usually surgery is required with the open reduction. We freshen the margin of the fracture till we get the bleeding because the end should be viable. So if we look the bleeding, the ends, that means the ends are viable. Sometimes shortening may be required, and bone graft is usually required to treat the non-union, and then we do the stable fixation, and sometimes we may need the post-operative splints also. So let's look at recent advances. Bone morphogenic proteins are growth factors in transforming growth factor B, and they cause osteoinduction. We have already seen in the last video, and they cause osteoinduction, which is dose dependent. That means how much bone BMG proteins, that how much we give. And in fracture, they enhance fracture healing, and they are also used for spinal fusions. Again, they will lead to the bone formation in the spine there. Let's look at this question. Hypertrophic non-union following a fracture, most appropriate treatment will be. So hypertrophic non-union, that means the ends are viable. blood supply is there, biology is good, but there is abundant callus, and it is not uniting because of the excessive mobility at the fracture site. So the treatment will be only stabilization. So the answer is A. Bone grafting is not required. Stabilization and bone grafting is. So the answer is A, stabilization. This is a question from PGI, so multiple answers are possible. Which of the following cause malunion except? So which of the following will not cause malunion? Open fracture? No. Infection can cause malunion. Bone graft? Bone graft will not cause malunion. It will help in the union. So C is true. We have to mark this answer. Soft tissue interposition, it can cause malunion. Proper alignment of the fracture, it will lead to the union again. So the answer is C and E. Which of the following is a characteristics of bone graft? Osteogenesis, osteoconduction, osteoinduction, all of the above. The answer is all of the above, we have already seen. Shin splints are pain on anterior aspect of leg, pain on anteromedial aspect of leg, pain on anterior aspect of thigh, pain on anteromedial aspect of thigh. The answer is B, pain on anteromedial aspect of leg. Let's look at the details. So what are shin splints? Shin splints are also called as medial tibia stress syndrome, MTSS. They are usually because of the medial periostitis of the tibia on the anteromedial side. So from the diagram we can see this is the area of tenderness, and the central area is an area of maximum tenderness. And clinically it is usually seen in patients with who do marathon running, or they are trackers, like high activity patients. And clinically, pain on the anteromedial aspect of the leg, x-rays will be usually be normal, and the differential diagnosis is popliteal entrapment syndrome. Treatment is again rest, ice, sometimes immobilization. So this was about the today's video. In the next video we will talk all about the management of the fractures. So thank you guys, thank you very much.